Hi everyone, my name is Scott Larson with the Institute for Juvenile Justice Ministries. I want to welcome you to this web-based training on the use of action methods. I'm going to look at 10 different action methods that can be used in any kind of environment, whether you're leading a Bible discussion group, a recovery group, doing a retreat with kids, doing a small group. These are not content, but they're contexts that can be created to make your learning more effective. Just a little bit of background. Term is psychodrama for what we're talking about, and while that might sound like a middle school girls retreat, it's a little bit more than that. The one who's sort of credited with the father of psychodrama is Dr. Jacob Marino. He was a medical doctor in Austria in the 1800s, and while he worked in a hospital, he would notice outside of his window these prostitutes who were often really abused by police and so many others in Austria, and how they connected with each other. And he got fascinated with this whole field that he would later call sociometry, the measurement of how people relate in groups. And he found that that was actually the most healing environment for people, especially those who were oppressed or downtrodden in some way, were how they connected in groups. And it was also the most effective way to engage with people who were downtrodden and in some ways disaffected. And so Dr. Marino came to the United States in 1926, and he began to work with girls at the Hudson Reform School in upstate New York. And he began to develop things that he had been observing in Austria, and this whole field of psychodrama became the seedbed for what today is all group therapy, experiential learning like ropes course sort of things, DBT and CBT and group dynamics, experiential psychology. They all have their roots in his early work. So what is the basis for doing this anyway? Research done out of Ohio State University looked at what helps us retain information that we get. And we looked at this at an earlier training in part. But basically, the work says that we only remember about 10% of what we're told. So a lecture format, while it's the primary way we teach or preach a sermon on Sunday morning, it's actually the least effective. At best, we remember 10%. Reading is a little better. 20% of what we read we can recall later. What we view on a video or in a movie, it's a little more multi-sensory. We actually retain about 30% of that. What we discuss in a group is 45% retention, and that's why we lead Bible discussion groups rather than chapel services where we just preach at kids. 45%, almost half, we will retain of what we discuss in a group. Now it starts to go up significantly from there. What we role play, we remember 60% of. When we have a structured experience, which is what psychodrama is, we remember 75%. And when we have a direct, purposeful encounter, those would be things like mission trips, we remember 90%. So we want to be working at the higher end of this, and action methods are a tool to make your teaching much more effective. The first one I want to look at, very basic, we call it name learning. And it's a great way to start a group where you may not know everybody or they don't know everybody. If it's a group of 6 up to probably 15 to 20 people, very quickly you can begin to learn their names. And one way to do it is just a stuffed animal, and I take it and I say, I'm Scott, and I throw it to somebody across the room, Jeremy. So you start off by everybody saying their name, and of course nobody remembers it after that, but now when I say Scott, Jeremy, Jeremy gets it, and he now throws it, Jeremy, Cindy, throws it over there. And we go that way around, and now everybody's sort of keyed in, because if they get it, they want to make sure they at least know one of their name. And once you do this for 15, 20 seconds, you add a second stuffed animal to it and do the same thing while the first one's going. And then a few seconds later, you add a third or a fourth. By the end of it, everybody knows everybody's name, but we've had a lot of fun, and it's a very brain-friendly way to engage. We know from our brain that, we're coming to a group of people we don't know. We're in sort of our survival brain, and this really accesses our limbic brain where connection happens. Now we're having fun, we're laughing together, we're throwing these things around, and at the end, everybody knows everybody's name. It's a great way to start almost any group, no matter what topic you're going to do. So a second one I want to talk about is called a spectrogram. And you've all taken these Likert tests: strongly disagree, neutral, agree, strong. So a spectrogram we set up as 10 stations, 0 to 10. And what we do is, in the room that we're in, we'll say this end of the room is 0, that end of the room is 10. And you'll make some statements and people will line up where they fit. Strongly disagree, strongly agree. And so you may make the question, if you're going to talk about a Bible study or whatever, where are you with God right now? 0, we're not on talking terms. 10, couldn't be closer. 7, and try to keep people off of 5, because that's sort of not committal. And then just move to where you are. And you'll find that sometimes you move to one place, you have it in your mind, you're a 7, but then when you get there, it doesn't feel quite right and you move a little bit. And so our bodies get aligned with our mind, which is really important. And then just call on a couple people. Why did you put yourself there? And whatever they say is perfect. Don't go deeper. Don't become psychologists with them. Just hear. Oh, thank you. Wonderful. Next question. Okay, so if you're in a juvenile facility, you might say, so how equipped do you feel succeed when you get out of here? 0, I'll be right back. 10, I'm good. I got everything I need. And have people move. And they'll likely stop one place and then move to another because their body is checking their mind. And it's a very useful thing for them to begin to listen to when you get out in the street and you're thinking everything's going to be great, but then your body is like, this doesn't look good. You start to listen to it. Your body's always giving you messages that your mind hasn't yet heard. A third one we call either or stand here if. And this is one that you would do just like in a straight line with people. And rather than 10 spots of a spectrogram, you have to choose one or the other. And you start them off very non-threatening, benign. I like mountains, step over here. I like ocean over here. You just have to pick one. Oh, I like them both. Well, you one or the other. Call on a couple people. I'm a hammer or I'm a nail. Well, what does that mean? Whatever you want it to. And people choose one or the other. And you're going to call on a couple people, and they'll say, well, for different reasons. I'm a hammer because I want to be in control, or I'm a nail because I want to serve. And they'll have different reasons for why they put themselves there, which is interesting. Again, we're calling people to decide and to get in tune with our whole self while we're doing it. Pick one or the other. A fourth one we call step-in circles. It's very useful when you have a group of people in the beginning and you feel like, wow, we don't know much about each other. And we make a big circle. And for example, if I'm going to be doing a training on working with kids in the juvenile justice system, we tend to come there and think about them and us. And so a question I might say is, if I look back on my life, and I would have made a different decision at a key time, perhaps I could have ended up in the prison system. And just think about if you've got an experience like that. It might have been when your parents got divorced and you got in with the wrong group of people. It might have been when you moved and you kind of lost all your connections and you got in with some negative folks. It might have been in a destructive relationship that if you had stayed in that, you could see yourself, this could have been a turning point. You could have gone this way instead of the way that you went. And then as people think about that, have people, if they can think of one place, to step into the circle. And a number of people will step in, you call on one of them. And they might say, well, I started to experiment, with alcohol, a little bit with drugs early on in school. I got in with the wrong people. And if we wouldn't have moved, I think I would have ended up where a lot of them went. And then everybody else step out, unless you can relate to that type of situation in some way. You were getting into drugs or alcohol, you're with a negative peer group. If that's your story, you step in. Just give a moment and all people will step in and maybe call on one or two more to share, and then everybody step out. Who else has one? Step in. And somebody steps in and gives something that's different. Well, it was when, I was in a really bad relationship and I was doing stuff that was starting to get me into trouble, and they'll talk some about that. Who else can relate to that? Step in. Your story's like that. And they step in and you hear from a couple of them. It's a way to connect us, and all of a sudden we know a lot more about each other, and we're a lot more alike than we thought when we started. Another really powerful action method is the paper plate mass. And we've done this a number of times with kids who are locked up, especially where we're doing some small group work. And it's very powerful because you get everybody a paper plate and a marker, and then me as the facilitator, I'll write on one side the things about me that I want you to see. He's wise, he's funny, he's deep, he's smart, confident. I'll write all those down. And then on the other side of the paper plate, I'll write the things that are also true about me that I don't want you to see. Well, I'm afraid, I'm insecure, I'm lonely, I'm not confident. And then you invite everybody in that circle to do the same. I invite people to share theirs as they want to, voluntarily. And as people do, it's a little intimidating in the beginning, but then someone does, and then it's like, oh, theirs is kind of like mine, and they share theirs, and pretty soon we've had some pretty deep and significant sharing. And when you then debrief it and say, well, what did you learn from that? Well, we all have the same stuff. And what connected you the most was actually the things we were trying to hide. When we revealed that, I felt like I trusted people more. And people say, well, this wouldn't really work in a jail, but it does with rival gang members, and we do it, and it's very powerful. And it never comes back against them because you self-disclosed it. And we all have the same stuff anyway. The paper plate mass is a very powerful action method tool, particularly where the topic might be communication or love or risks or fears or those sort of things. Bibliodramas are another thing that's specific toward work that we may do in a juvenile facility around Bible study. Remember, we said that we remember about 10% of what somebody tells us and 20% of what we read in the Bible, but if we can role play it, we'll remember 60%. And there's some passages that are really set up well for this. One is in Acts chapter 15, verses 16 to 20. It's a story between Paul and Barnabas in a dispute that they have over John Mark, who had gone with them on their first missionary journey and deserted them. And now it's time to go out on a second journey. And Paul says, hey, John Mark, forget it. He really bailed on us the first time. And Barnabas is saying, no, he deserves another chance. And they get into such a sharp dispute that they actually break company over it. And Paul goes with Silas one direction, and Barnabas and John Mark go another. And so you'd read the passage first and then call out 4 people who would want to come up and assign them one of the roles. You can be Paul, you're Barnabas, you're John Mark, you're Silas. And just have a conversation with each other about what happened and how you're feeling. And let them just go at it. And you'll find that they really take into the roles that they were. This is part of the psychodrama, is this idea that even a sociopath can't front in a role play. They become that person if you give them a few minutes to jump into it. A good way to wrap up a teaching is what's called doubling, and it helps train us to communicate both fact and feeling. And so in a circle, we might say, okay, we've talked about action methods today. So one at a time, from where you're sitting, give me a fact that something you learned about this training. And then somebody may say, well, that action methods are an effective way to communicate. I learned how to use some tools and got to practice with it and have a lot of fun. And then I would get up and stand behind my chair, and I would describe from that place the feelings I had about this. And so I stated the fact. Now I get up and I move behind my chair and I say, and it felt a little vulnerable because I shared some things, especially around that paper plate, that I haven't told, I don't know, some of them I probably haven't told anybody. And now all these people know that about me. So I feel a little vulnerable about that. I also feel really connected, that I've heard other people share things and I've said stuff, and I feel close to this group. Probably more than I do in most of my life. Okay, sit down. Now the next person goes. That's doubling. And it trains people to state the facts, but then to connect to the feelings that are also under those. The locogram is another method that we use. And unlike the either or, where you have two options, or the spectrogram where you have 10, the locogram, you have 4 of them. And so after this kind of training, we might say, okay, go to one of 4 places in the room, one of 4 corners. Go over here. If I love this action method stuff, I'm going to use it tomorrow. Over to here, this corner, if I like this stuff, but I don't really feel equipped to yet put it into place, but I want to learn more, go over to this corner. If I think it's pretty good, but I don't feel confident in doing it really, or over to here is I don't like this stuff. This is the kind of stuff that's just not me. I would never do it. None of them are right or wrong, good or bad, but just go to one of those 4 corners so that people choose and then hear from a couple of people. And it also helps to kind of connect you to where people are with this. And wherever they are is perfect. It's just where they are. But you give 4 options, and you can do it around how you deal with your anger. You can do it around fear, whatever topic it is, but you give 4 distinct different places that people can locate themselves in. It's called a locogram. And then the last one is a summarizing activity, and this is always good for people to end with. And that is one thing that they learned that they want to take and apply for themselves. And with none of these, you don't have everybody share, but it's really 2 or 3. And when they share, it connects for other people and kind of primes them to share maybe more in the next exercise. But the summarizing, you might also have them acknowledge one other person in the group and some value that they created for them. So when Jim came and said that, when he played that in the bibliodrama, that really connected for me, and it was a lot of value. I saw myself in Barnabas big time. I just want to thank him. Awesome. Who else? And so that's a way to kind of cap it and bring it together. You might also go back to the spectrogram. So now we've had an hour training around action methods. How confident are you in doing them now? Or around leading a Bible study with kids? And then go line up again. And then ask people, if you moved one way or the other in that, let me just hear from a couple of you. Why did you move to this point? What's different about that? So I want to thank you for participating in this online training on action methods. We have 14 other ones on ijjm.org. We encourage you to go there, take them, take the tests at the end. Let us know as well that you've done it at info@ijjm. We want to keep track of all the courses you've taken so that we can issue you a certificate in juvenile justice ministries at the end.